When the consumer reaches checkout, they're no longer browsing, they're buying. It's a moment of peak intent, attention, and engagement. That's where Rokt comes in. Rokt helps brands reach customers at the moment that matters most, delivering relevant offers and content that feel like a natural part of the transaction experience, not an interruption. Learn more at rokt.com. Welcome everyone to In the Game, an eMarketer sports marketing podcast made possible by Rokt. This is a conversation about the World Cup, capturing fans' attention at the world's biggest event. Hello folks, I'm Marcus, and today I'm alongside two people on the forecasting team that I used to be on that I miss very dearly. Living in New York,
we miss
Senior
you,
Director of... Thank you, finally, took you long enough. You have to cut that in. Living in New York, Senior Director of Forecasts, Oscar Orozco.
Hello, listeners. So happy to be on my first In the Game episode, Marcus. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And we're also joined by Senior Forecasting Analyst, living down in Nashville, Drew Spink.
Hey, thank you to be here, Marcus.
Yes.
Also haven't been on this type podcast before, so looking forward to it.
Welcome both. All right, folks. Today's topic, winning the World Cup, capturing fans at the world's biggest event. All right, so the 2026 FIFA World Cup, co-hosted by the US, Canada and Mexico, is the largest in history, expanding from 32 to 48 teams and running from the 11th of June to the 19th of July this year. Oh, sorry, one second. This. Okay. Sorry about that. Sorry about this. Just wardrobe shape.
Absolutely love it. It's pretty. It's pretty.
For our listeners, just putting on my England jersey. Sorry about that. I should have had that on. Beginning. I didn't tell you guys I was going to put this on because I didn't want you to represent any other country on the show.
You are distracting me by no. It's a pretty jersey, Marcus, but can't say I share the same fandom as you. I have to say that.
I wish I could say the same. It's a painful team to root for. My mum just got this to me, so thank you to mum for the England jersey for this year. But we're talking all about the World Cup, gang. What stat, I'll start with you, Oscar, what stat best represents the scale of this World Cup? Lots to choose from.
Listen, there are a lot to choose from, like you said. I mean, I really do want to point out this is the biggest World Cup of all time. 48 teams, as you said.
Yeah, normally 32 for folks who haven't.
32.
For folks who don't normally watch, it's gone from 32 to 48.
Exactly, and I think we were very close to seeing 64, and I was against it.
Interesting.
I really do believe it. I was against it for a long time. There were rumors. Now I am pushing for it, so it's only going to get bigger. But I think, you have to highlight that. It just means so many more matches. Yep. But I'll give you one other one.
Okay.
The other stat is that Austria versus Jordan filled up the stadium, was filled up by more than 98% capacity. Austria versus Jordan.
Wow.
And we have not seen any other matches drop below 98%. So
wow.
It just speaks to just how excited fans are, how many people are going to games, and just, generally how successful the tournament has been thus far. And we're not done yet.
Yeah. Stadiums being filled all over the shop. One of the numbers I had was over 5 million fans expected to attend the World Cup's 104 matches. So more teams, more matches, as Oscar mentioned, across Canada, Mexico, and the US. This number, 6 billion more engaging with the newly expanded competition this year. 6 billion people. There's about 8 billion in the world. So just for reference. So 3/4 of people in the world paying attention to this competition, according to FIFA. Drew, what was your figure or figures?
Mine's just an extension of what you were just talking about. That's 6 billion, but we're just putting it into reference of other sporting events in the world. So the last World Cup, the single match, the final, had 1.5 billion viewers. The entire last Summer Olympics had 3 billion, and the Cricket World Cup had 2.6 billion over the course of the week. And just for reference, for American listeners, our biggest event is usually the Super Bowl. The last one had 120 million viewers. So that would be the equivalent of 50 Super Bowls that will be happening over the course of this entire tournament.
Insane. And you're saying it's cumulative, some of those, right? So this is, you're talking about
Yeah,
one
cumulative could
match.
get up
One
to
match, yeah.
6 billion, but even just a single total for the final is 10 times bigger than the Super Bowl on the world stage.
Yeah. Wow. That is an excellent one. Um, it was, I mean, the World Cup every year, it really is just the centerpiece of the year. It's
Yeah.
the thing everyone looks forward to. And there was high expectations in terms of what it would do for the US, for the other countries hosting. And the America needed it. Last year, tourism to the US was down actually about 5%. And there was hopes that it would be up about 5% this year. However, our principal analyst, Zach Stambor, noting early forecasts for the World Cup, it said painted a rosy picture. Early forecast, that is. FIFA projected over $30 billion in an economic boost, whilst the US Travel Association expected a surge in tourism, with visitors spending about $5,000 US dollars per trip. That's about 1.7 times, nearly twice as much as the typical international visitor, and 1 in 3 planning to stay longer than 2 weeks. So it's supposed to be this huge kind of infusion into the economy. Things have changed since then. Drew, how to you has the current economic climate affected the World Cup?
I think that there's been a lot of like differing narratives that I've heard. Like what Oscar mentioned earlier is that none of the stadium populations have been below 98%, and a ton of people have been tuning in. But at the same time, when the tickets were earlier sold, FIFA used dynamic pricing for the first time. So some of the tickets skyrocketed up towards $10,000, and even the
Yeah.
cheapest ones on some of the matches, like in New York, were more expensive than even tickets at the last final in the World Cup. So I think that there's been kind of a barrier of people that, even for just like American fans at home who might be
Hmm.
able to more easily go to these games and engage, it's just really expensive.
Yeah.
So I think that if they're not really tuned in or planning on going in the first place, I think that high price tag might be enough to deter them from going to the games
Yeah.
in the first
Yeah.
point.
People are just so much more price sensitive. I mean, there's the war in Iran going on. Oil prices have been higher, energy prices have been higher. Things generally more expensive, and so we have noticed people pulling back in certain areas, and travel, attendance to sporting events, entertainment is going to be one of the areas they're more sensitive to.
Yeah, I'd point out I totally agree with you guys. It's complicated, but I think one of the key numbers for me that's really telling the story is international travel numbers that they're down. I think FIFA had estimated that 40% of World Cup visitors would be international travelers, and that won't be the case. So what that means is that it appears to be local fans, right? Or maybe some of them are casual compared to your average World Cup,
Yeah.
fan that normally attends. So it's being driven by domestic, people who are living here, staying here long term. And then by here, I mean, obviously the US and Mexico as well, Canada. So it's kind of interesting. But what that means is, of course, we're not seeing that big bump up in international visitors, and it remains to be seen
Yeah.
what that will mean, but that's
Yeah.
the reality. That's the
For
reality.
advertisers, it means it's a different demographic. If you're expecting one type of audience to show up, and it's a different type.
Exactly, exactly. And it's impacting, hotel bookings. I mean, flight prices are up. I mean, there are obviously still people traveling, but I think the domestic flights as well. So you might be seeing, right, the New York fan traveling to Kansas City, or,
Yeah.
over to Los Angeles to see a game. So it puts definitely more pressure on the success of the tournament being driven by US and Mexican Canadian fans. We'll
Yeah.
see if they can deliver out to the final stages, perhaps if their teams are not still in the tournament.
Yeah, a month or two ago, I was reading that the average worldwide airplane ticket was up about 25% from the year before. So prices are, it's already expensive to travel, and when something as expensive as a big ticket item, is a couple hundred, 2, 3, 400 at least dollars plus thousands, whatever, starts going up by 25% in 12 months. It definitely affects people's plans. Oscar, you mentioned that it might be a different type of fan. Americans not known for putting soccer at the top of their list when it comes to sports. Drew, how many Americans are you expecting to care about the event? What's your take on American sentiment towards the World Cup?
Yeah, so again, with the kind of mixed messaging thing that we've already been talking about on the last couple questions. So all the polling that was basically done on the event before it started. So one from Emerson College found that about 45% of Americans had no interest and 33% had small interest. So
Wow.
that's 75%
Wow.
of all Americans. And then a YouGov survey said it was even bleaker, that 55% just didn't care at all and showed no interest. Now,
Mhm.
if we look at the results of the games that have happened so far,
Mm.
FS1 Fox's viewership is up over 130%, and Telemundo's is up over 250% from where it was
Wow.
in Qatar.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
Fox now projects 150 million people will watch some portion of the coverage, approaching the 170 million that they usually see across the NFL season.
Okay.
So we're seeing different things, and I think
Yeah.
that the success of the U.S. team so far has helped a lot in pushing
Yes.
them for
Mm.
people that are now actually willing to engage. Because for a long time, Americans haven't really cared about soccer because
Mm.
we haven't been very good, and we're expecting to
Yeah.
lose, or they try and drum up some type of narrative for us to root for, but people don't like really like it.
Yeah.
So, but now that we're 2-0 and the team looks better than any American team I've seen in my lifetime. I
Yeah.
think he's like, we can actually do this. Like, rally behind that because Americans do love sports and they do love to.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think like once there's like a horse for them to ride behind, then they will
Yeah.
actually engage and the numbers will go up.
The want to is definitely there. And I had some
Mm.
similarly bleak, I think to use your word, true numbers. One was from newsletter analyst, our newsletter analyst Marissa Jones. Just 10% of Americans expressed interest in the tournament, placing the US among the countries with the lowest percentage of World Cup followers, according to 55 Blue, that's formerly Kantar. Second one was from Chris Wood, one of our analysts. Roughly 35% of US adults plan to watch this year's World Cup. That was in November, Ipsos survey. That's a low compared to other nations like Argentina's 79%. But Oscar, it's kind of interesting because on the one hand, not a ton of interest in watching potentially, but
Mm.
growing interest in football in general. Maybe not the US men's team, definitely more the US women's team because they've won, I think it's
Yeah,
4
they've
titles, the
killed
most
it.
titles in history for women's soccer, football. But at grassroots level, there is a lot more interest in soccer. This number blew me away. According to Ampere Analysis, soccer is US fans' self-declared third favorite sport. So if you ask Americans what are your favorite sports, they say football, American football, unsurprisingly. They say it was about 36%, 5%. Basketball is about 18, 17, 18%. Soccer, 10%. According, as of the end of 2024. That's 1 percentage point more, 9%, than people who chose baseball, America's supposedly favorite pastime.
That's right. No, absolutely. I mean, it's complex, like everything we're talking about today, but that's undoubtedly the truth. There's been so much growth behind the game. Now, it's not universal, right? When we think of coast to coast in the country, right? It is focused in perhaps major urban
Good point.
enclaves, specific cities. We know, shouting out any listeners on the Pacific Northwest, in the Pacific Northwest, that's a huge area where soccer is really popular. So, it's just not universal. I think it will get there, but that survey rings true to me. I mean, I think soccer's become so much popular. The audience is I was going to point out as well, what I've been reading and seeing is that it does skew younger. So, which means, right,
Yes.
that over time we should expect this to continue growing. Perhaps
Yes.
that's not the case with baseball, right, where the demographic might be a bit older, and it's
Great
more
point.
multicultural. So it's reflecting the
Yes.
reality of the U.S., and the population itself. So,
Yeah.
and so that's definitely also a boy for the sport itself here in the country. To pivot a little bit to scold our Canadian counterparts, our Canadian neighbors, I was really disappointed during the opening match for Canada, their first game of the tournament, in the same city. It was held in Toronto. There was a Toronto Blue Jays game, which I didn't. It was literally they held it the same day. I couldn't believe that. So Canada has some more work to do than we do here.
But to that point, there are other sports going on. And that's the thing that was working against this tournament. According to Harris poll, the US's America's hosting duties aren't driving a tremendous amount of interest in this year's World Cup as much as you might expect. War in Iran, obviously on people's minds. Knicks winning the NBA championship. The WNBA is more popular than ever, and baseball's still on. And so it is always going to be in competition with some sport that's going on in the calendar year in America. I wanted to quickly jump on those 2 points you mentioned, and Drew, get your take on them as well if you have some thoughts here. Oscar, any others? Who's planning to watch? Pretty evenly. Well, it does skew younger, but it doesn't skew as young as I thought it might. 40% of Gen Z and millennials, according to Numerator. 32% of Gen X. And 24% of boomers plan to watch. This is as of May. So it definitely skews younger, but not as much as I thought. And then the second point, this is fascinating. The very notable differences by demographic. This is from Pew Research Center. Immigrants, they say, more than twice as likely as US-born citizens to follow the World Cup. Men, 33%, women, 24%, so some differences there. Hispanic, 42% compared to 29% for black and 23% for white. And Oscar, I thought this was an interesting point from an Adweek piece from CMO of Zappi, Natalie Kelly. She writes, it's been 30 years since the US last hosted the World Cup. In that time, the Hispanic population has nearly tripled. And nearly 45 million people in America speak the Spanish language at home, making the US the second largest Spanish-speaking population in the world after Mexico. She says the face of the country has changed, but advertisers haven't clocked it. In the same time period, Spanish language programming spend has gone from 3% of total ad budgets to 4%. From 3% to 4%, a quarter of a century of demographic transformation answered with 1 percentage point. Any takes on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know what, because I think it does oversimplify the group, right? The group encompasses potentially people from 20 different countries.
Great point.
It can be hard to target individuals. And it's not as simple as just having Spanish language content. I mean, I think it's increasingly a bilingual community as well. So it's complex, but it does surprise me. I hadn't seen that data point, that it's only up 1 percentage point over that time.
Yeah, shocking.
But I would also point out, there was incredible viewership number. We could have mentioned this earlier, but for the opening round, the first round game match for the U.S. against Paraguay, but 10 million, I believe, close to 10 million of those viewers were on Telemundo. So it speaks to that, you would assume that the community might be supporting other countries, but a lot of people are supporting the U.S. Alone,
Yeah.
So it's really a fascinating point, and I do believe marketers have still not been able to kind of hit on the right way to communicate to the Hispanic community.
Yeah. Drew, any thoughts on these or any other viewership changes that you're interested in?
No, I think they're both very interesting points. And I'm also surprised that it's only increased 1 percentage point in the last 25 years. But to Oscar's point, Telemundo, their viewership has been up over 250% compared to the Qatar World Cup.
Yeah.
So clearly the Hispanic American people that live here are engaging with it more in their host country. So I do think that is definitely a bigger opportunity for a population to engage with. And I think that, I mean, for the most part, American football is the most popular, but it's predominantly just played by white and African American players, whereas immigrant communities, that's what they grew up playing, it's what they grew up watching, and it's what they see of themselves on TV. So I think that is just, I don't think it's a lack of them being interested in sport, it's just the right sport. So I think this is a great opportunity to take advantage of that.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'd point out one quick other thing on Telemundo. What I have seen, this is anecdotal, but there are some games not shown on Fox. They're perhaps on like on FS1, which is more of like a cable channels. I do think maybe some people are comfortable watching where you can get Telemundo over the air and through just like it's essentially like a broadcast channel. So it speaks to people that they just want to see a specific game, and it might be the only way to see it as well. So it might be overinflating those numbers a bit. But nonetheless, a lot of growth on Telemundo, and you would expect more and more there, as well as VIX. I'll shout out VIX. VIX, it's a streaming platform, very niche, but it's you can see games through there, and I believe that they're seeing a lot of success as well throughout the tournament so far.
And same with Tubi. Tubi's showing all the U.S. games for free.
Tubi as well. Yeah.
One of the stat that really tells a very interesting story about where soccer is at the moment. The Economist noting spending on soccer media rights in America, has risen fourfold in the past decade and is now greater than the amount spent on baseball rights, according to Daniel Monaghan of Ampere. He notes that whereas America's baseball fans focus on a single league, the MLB, as Oscar will know, America's soccer fans pay attention to everything from the English Premier League to Spain's La Liga, driving up the sport's total value. America has become the biggest foreign market for the four largest European leagues. Which is incredible. A great line from The Economist here says America may still have some catching up to do when playing men's football, but in watching, it is already world class. They are watching mainly on TV, where Americans watch and listen to where they're planning to watch and listen to the World Cup. It's pretty fragmented, but TV still rules the roost. You can see from this data on the screen from Think Now Research, 73% of US soccer fans saying they're planning to watch or listen to regular TV to watch the tournament, 73%. Social media live streams, 35%. Mobile apps and public viewing events, both with 31%. And then in-person at stadium, 21%. Radio, etc. further down the list. Jens, let's talk about... we talked a little bit about it before, I believe, when we were talking about how the current economic climate is going to affect people traveling to different games. And our analyst, Ariel Fager, questioning whether the World Cup will kick off a surge of sports tourism. Nearly half, she says, of Mexican adults, 49% and 44% of Canadian adults report having traveled specifically to attend a sporting event, compared to less than a third, 32% of US consumers. Just 2% of... Oh, and I don't remember who made this point. I think it might have been Stuart, who runs the team. But someone, when I said that point, was like, well, if you're in Canada, you're more likely to maybe come across the border into the US to see basketball games or whatever. So maybe that's part of it, which I thought was interesting. But just 2% of US consumers have ever traveled abroad to a sporting event. That first stat was domestically, but traveling abroad, just 2%. Canadians, 19, Mexicans, 14 per YouGov. Drew, in your opinion, will the World Cup kick off a surge of sports tourism for Americans?
I think it's possible, definitely. I just pulled this from Airbnb, but they were saying that they are expecting this to be their biggest event ever, which would surpass the 2024 Olympics. So that's like counting worldwide, but wow. They seem to think so. And I think the idea behind it is that for the people that are traveling, so more than 3/4 of the World Cup travelers plan to stay between 6 to 12 nights, often stringing multiple cities together. So I think Oscar was one of the people who bought tickets in multiple cities, planning to go to multiple cities. So I think that he's representative of what kind of I'm talking about. And I think Airbnb sees that in their booking as well.
Yeah, and absolutely, and I realize, that it's not for everybody. It depends. Yeah, I am a big football fan. Maybe I should have said that at the beginning, huh? Some of my takes are a bit biased here, but no. But jokes aside, I mean, I do I agree with you, Drew. I think in short, yes, it's going to kick off some sort of domestic sports-led tourism, but I wouldn't call it a blanket surge, right? I think I mentioned this earlier, right? We were talking about specific markets. I mean, the tournament's being held across, I believe, a dozen U.S. cities, and it probably will spill over into neighboring, cities or towns around those cities. I've found it very interesting that the clubs are all based across the whole country and in Canada, where their training grounds are. So, I can speak to Spain, for example. They're in Chattanooga, and I think that's probably led to a nice uplift in local businesses there. But it's not this blanket surge, this massive movement of Americans all over. It does, I saw a stat from Numerator finding that only about 1.6% of U.S. consumers plan to attend, right? So it's going to be higher than that, but ultimately it is a specific type of consumer and fan, and that can go and can pay for it, and because it is expensive.
Yeah. Why people do it? Supporting a specific team was the number one reason US consumers travel for sports, said Nicole Pike, global head of YouGov Sport. We had an eMarketer article. It was interesting because Americans will travel. They just will travel for certain types of events. So US sports travelers are equally willing to travel for regular season and playoff matches. So 41%. That outpaces worldwide fans by double digits on both. However, they trail global travelers by 18 points on major single sport international events. This is from a December 2025 YouGov survey. So when it comes to major multi-sport international events, domestic championship matches, major single sporting international events. So it depends on the type of event, but they trail most folks worldwide when it comes to these. Apart from regular season and playoff matches, they are willing to travel for those. Which makes sense because
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and I think if anyone's to break that trend, it will be like what Drew said. If the U.S. soccer team continues to improve, because those are the international tournaments where you would expect that big surge in travel abroad. But the popular sports, they're usually pretty they're held domestically, and the top teams are only here in the U.S. So
I wonder what share of, I don't know if you guys see any stat, what share of the fans at the international NFL games are American. Because they have, I think, 9 games this coming season where they'll have, one in Germany, one in France, one in England, et cetera, et cetera. One of the NFL games, regular season games. And so I do wonder what share of that audience is Americans traveling versus fans in those countries or expats living abroad. That's an interesting tell.
I think it's majority Americans. I think the first game held abroad, I believe it was in London. It was probably 99% Americans.
But I think it's changed quite a lot
it's
now.
Changing.
When I've been to a few London games, it's definitely an international crowd. Sorry, Drew.
I was going to say, I think it's actually mostly expats that are there. I don't think it's domestic people traveling there. I mean, especially I think one of the games for the NFL season this year is going to be in Australia. So that's asking Americans to travel for some of us 18 plus hours on a plane to go watch one football game and then come home. That's a hard sell. I mean, even just to go to Europe for most of Americans is very far.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see that some of those games
That's a great point,
by British or other European fans are just getting better exposure to the game. But I do think in particular, those are mostly expats that are.
Yeah, the geography of it definitely matters. Like my sister's an Arsenal fan. They got beat by PSG. Sorry, Nicole. And for her, it's a 2-hour train from London to Paris. I don't know where the game was. But my point being that if you fly around Europe, it's an hour or two to get there. The final actually probably was somewhere else at a neutral site. She probably doesn't want to go to Paris ever again.
I should know this, but it was.
You should know this.
Too far. It wasn't too far. Everything's close within
Everything's
Europe,
close. Exactly. Ariel notes that the intent gap is just looking like it's going to be just as wide moving forward. Though 11% of US consumers plan to travel for a sporting event in the next year. 24% of Canadians, 32% of Mexicans, according to YouGov. But we'll see. Yeah, maybe. If America can go far, this could change things. Jens, let's end by talking a bit about what marketers can be thinking about here. What, Oscar, to you is one of the best ways to win fan attention during this competition? Or maybe there are things that marketers can replicate at other major sporting events?
I mean, I have now experienced it. I've been to a match already. I've been to a big event here down in Brooklyn. It's really the best way is to connect with consumers, I believe. Now everything's a mix of digital and in person, but it's with gamifying things, right? It's not just relying on these traditional scalable TV spots or things like that, but it's in stadium activation. It's about, and all of these sponsors are so recognizable, but about, making them just really about having an experience, making the fans experience it in person. And that's what the World Cup does so well. I mean, I found this stat from Nielsen saying that it's the most sponsor-friendly audience in sports, anyone who's a World Cup fan, because the World Cup is about connecting the world. It's about connecting world fans. So, it's whatever the brands do, there is no other event in the world where the brands will connect as closely with the sponsors as an event like this. So those are the types of things that really work.
Stella Artois has a work from the bar campaign, which we mentioned on the Reimagine Retail show that Ariel hosted last week. And they're basically saying, look, fans are going to want to watch the game during work. We're going to try and make it easier for you, so you have to do it in secret, Oscar. And I think it was really, I think it's a really good way of, to your point, connecting
Marcus, please.
with the audience and speaking directly to what they want to be doing in that moment, and trying to help them to do that. I think they're covering a certain number of bar tabs if you register online. So very clever campaign. Drew, how about you? What some of the ways you think brands, marketers can be winning fan attention during this competition or others?
I mean, I agree with everything Oscar just said, and I think, elaborate a little bit more on those points. But to the core, I agree. It's one of them is just staying consistent. I mean, the World Cup is a long event, especially with the expanded format.
Good point.
So fans, like in the Super Bowl, for example, or other American sporting events, there's a lot of big budget advertisements that's just shooting for like one big star to pay attention to. I don't think that's as valuable here. I think it's the small stuff that you just see over and over again and you keep coming back to without necessarily being like annoying, but like putting all your eggs in one basket, like just for the final, doesn't seem as productive to me as doing a bunch of little ones and more smaller local type advertisements across the country to just spread it out.
Yeah, that's a great take.
And then additionally, what makes the World Cup great is the fans, is the local populations, is the authenticity that is driven by that experience, by fans walking through Inglewood in LA, the Bosnian fans like shouting and having a parade. Like,
I saw this.
It's not the celebrities that are attending the event like it is Super Bowl, where that's very like a high ticket, like look who's who is here. That's not what people engage with when they're coming to this type of sporting event. So I don't think that kind of going that route solves much either. It's just staying true, authentic, local, and almost small in some ways to be like relatable to who you're trying to market to.
Yeah. To that point, really quick, two things. One, it seemed like there was an overlap, but I think Stuart, I don't know if you were telling me this about how there was a crossover between Knicks fans and Brazil soccer fans running around New York and kind of like cheering for each other. There was
I lived it.
Okay, Oscar can testify. And so maybe there's something there where local teams can get on board, whether it's the US team or other clubs, and they can do crossovers to help drum up interest. And then also to what you were saying, Drew, I think it's a great point, the authenticity of the fans' experience. Another campaign we talked about on the retail show was this New York Knicks Nike spot, the always never slept, always dreamed, where they have the fan running through the streets after the Knicks win, and and he gets to a point where there's just like a parade of fans basically losing their minds because they just won. And it is, again, it wasn't about a celebrity, it was about just a normal New Yorker and the experience that they were having.
And I'm sure little Oscar, who grew up in Queens, very much identified with that kid in that commercial. So
absolutely, this is exactly. I mean, this is the biggest stage to show your national pride, and there's just no other way to do it. So it's really about connecting with those specific communities. And fans are right now, they're kind of hovering in specific cities because of where their teams play. So there's this real ability, a real way to connect the sort of local, like what you mentioned, Drew, the local communities, cities with these specific national teams, and a lot of beautiful stuff's coming from that. But that's what it's all about, a cultural festival.
An example of that would be, I can't verify this, but I heard it through internet and Twitter that Samuel Adams got, like, all of their beer got drinking in Boston by the Scottish fans that were there, which is
that's right.
Crazy if that's true. But like they kind of marketed themselves as like, we are the Boston beer, like we're the American beer, and that's what everybody was just drinking while they were there.
Yeah,
so
that's a great example.
Yeah, very nice. Cheeky Scots. I've got one last one for you. FIFA has introduced 3-minute hydration breaks midway. I knew Oscar was going to wince it. Midway through each half amid expectations of high temperatures. So that is an additional an additional 10 hours of advertising potential, TV commercials, displays in arenas, etc. My question was, will this be instituted down the road? It's painful for fans of football because they're like, the game shouldn't be stopped halfway through. However, I felt the same way when they were advertising during free throws at basketball games. And now I'm kind of used to it. It does annoy me, but kind of used to it. I do wonder, are they going to institute this down the road in other major competitions?
I think it will be. Everyone's saying, well, this is the the Americans turning the sport into 4 quarters. Sure, that's what's happening.
Probably.
But you can't leave that money out,
Yes.
to the side there. So I do think
Yes.
we'll see it again in 4 years. It'll be held in Spain and Portugal and Morocco, 100%. There's no way we
cool.
won't. And there's
Yeah.
advertiser demand for it. And I, just to shout out to the forecasting team, we did know about this, and it was a part of why it factored into our forecast.
Oh, wow.
For World Cup, for World Cup converged TV advertising. Please do check out that forecast, listeners.
That's why I love this team.
And it's definitely one of the main reasons why we expect growth to be triple digits higher than what we saw in Qatar 4 years ago.
Yeah. And recent World Cups have included drinks breaks, but it's been at the discretion of the ref or when a certain temperature has been reached. It's not been we're gonna cut this into 4 quarters and have extra commercials. But the players definitely need to stay hydrated. So maybe it's for that reason. It's probably not. That's all we've got time for this episode. I hope to see you all on this show next month. Maybe you two. I meant the audience, but maybe you guys will be back. Thanks for agreeing without agreeing. Thank you to Lance and the production crew, and Stuart, who's helping us out with today's episode. And of course, thank you to my guests. Thank you to Oscar.
Thanks for having me, Marcus. Yes, please. I'll be back in a month. Just let me know.
Very nice. I'll see you then. Thank you to Drew.
Yeah, thank you as well. This was fun and glad to be here as always.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to everyone listening to In the Game, an eMarketer sports marketing podcast made possible by Rokt.